Hello, I'm Amanda Isaac. I'm Associate Curator at George Washington's Mount Vernon, and today we're standing in the presence of General George Washington, or at least the most accurate likeness that we have of Washington to date. This bust of Washington is usually on display in the Donald W. Reynolds Museum and Education Center, but today we've got it off view to be able to examine it more closely and do some detailed photography. It was created by Jean-Antoine Houdon in 1785. Houdon was a renowned sculptor in France, and Benjamin Franklin Thomas Jefferson commissioned Houdon to make a life-size sculpture of Washington. It was originally intended to sit in the Virginia Capitol. Well, there was no way that Washington was going to be able to come over to France at that time. So Houdon drops what he's doing, sails over to America, and spends 2 weeks here following Washington around, observing his every movement as he goes about his farms and his business, really trying to capture the essence of this man, the man who was considered the greatest man of his age for having relinquished power when he really had a whole nation in his grasp. Houdon makes 2 sculptures during his time here with Washington. The first is this bust that he crafts from clay and then fires here somewhere on the estate, so at a relatively low temperature. Houdon signed the piece right here along the shoulder line. You can just make out the word Houdon, an F period. That stands for fecit, or made in Latin, and then the year, 1785. Unfortunately, because it was fired at such a low temperature, it was not very stable, and so over time it developed cracks. Eventually, at some point, it may have even actually been knocked over or fallen apart. And you can see the evidence of that, particularly in the back here. During his time here, Houdon creates this bust, but he also creates a life mask of Washington, one that's made by, he lays Washington out, covers his face with plaster, sticks quills up his nostrils to allow him to breathe. Well, he leaves the bust here at Mount Vernon as a gift to George Washington. Depending on what light you're looking at it in, depending on the angle you look at it from, you see Washington as a visionary. He's gazing off into the distance, into the future. You see him as a godlike hero in the tradition of Greek and Roman heroes, Greek sculpture. But you also see him very much as a man. Look carefully and you see the sags underneath his chin, the crow's feet around his eyes, the wrinkles on his nose and his forehead. The wear and tear of time have really taken their toll on this man. You could even argue that there's an element of sorrow in that gaze of his, sorrow at the unfulfilled promises of the American Revolution, sorrow at the turmoil and the instability of the United States at the time. This is before we've created and ratified the Constitution, when we're still a very loose organization of states. So it's truly a masterpiece, and really the closest we come to knowing Washington and knowing this great man.